Good afternoon. There is just one item of business today, which is a statement by the Cabinet Secretary for Justice regarding the decision on Mr Abdelbaset Al Megrahi. This is a topic of the utmost seriousness, and the eyes of many across the globe are upon this Parliament today. While today's business will, I know, be understandably emotive, I would respectfully remind members that we all have a part to play in maintaining the sense of dignity and decorum that is expected of us. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement, and therefore there should be no interruptions or interventions during it. This is a 20-minute statement, and I now call on the Cabinet Secretary for Justice, Kenny MacAskill.
Presiding Officer, on 20 August I announced the decisions I had taken in relation to two applications in respect of Mr Abdelbaset Al Megrahi. I am absolutely committed to the integrity of this institution. I believe it is appropriate that I should lay out the basis and reasoning of my decision. Accordingly, I will now repeat the substance of that announcement for the benefit of Parliament, and then answer any and all questions which members may have. On the evening of 21 December 1988, a heinous crime was perpetrated. It claimed the lives of 270 innocent civilians. 4 days before Christmas, men, women and children going about their daily lives were truly murdered. They included 11 from one small Scottish town. That town was Lockerbie, a name that will forever be associated with the worst terrorist atrocity ever committed on UK soil. A prisoner transfer application was submitted by the Government of Libya seeking the transfer of Mr Al Megrahi, the man convicted of those offences in the Scottish courts. He also sought to be released on compassionate grounds. This crime precedes both the election of our government and even the restoration of a parliament in Scotland. The decisions are a consequence of the post of Justice Secretary that I am proud and privileged to hold. The applications had been lawfully made, and I was obliged to address them. Final advice from my officials was given late on Friday, 14 August 2009. I reflected upon that advice before making and announcing my decisions. It was my responsibility to decide upon these two applications. These were my decisions and my decisions alone. In considering these applications, I strictly followed due process, including the procedures laid down in the Prisoner Transfer Agreement and in the Scottish Prison Service Guidance on Compassionate Release. I listened to many representations and received substantial submissions. I have already published key material on both the applications for prisoner transfer and for compassionate release. I will now look to publish other relevant material. Some of this can only be done with the permission of others, which we are now seeking. The Scottish Police and Prosecution Service undertook a detailed and comprehensive investigation with the assistance of the United States and other authorities. I pay tribute to them for the exceptional manner in which they operated in dealing with both the aftermath of the atrocity and the complexity of a worldwide investigation. When Mr Al Megrahi was brought to justice, it was before a Scottish court sitting in the Netherlands, and I pay tribute to our judges who presided and acted justly. Mr Al Megrahi was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of 270 people. When such an appalling crime is perpetrated, it is appropriate that a severe sentence be imposed. Mr Al Megrahi has since withdrawn his appeal against both conviction and sentence. As I have said consistently throughout, that is a matter for him and the courts. That was his decision. My decisions were predicated on the fact that he was properly investigated, a lawful conviction passed and a life sentence imposed. There remain concerns to some on the wider issues of the Lockerbie atrocity. This is a global issue, and international in its nature. The questions to be asked and answered are beyond the jurisdiction of Scots law and the restricted remit of the Scottish Government. If a further inquiry were felt to be appropriate, then it should be initiated by those with the required power and authority. The Scottish Government would be happy to fully cooperate in such an inquiry. The Libyan Government applied on 5 May 2009 for the transfer of Mr Al Megrahi. Prisoner transfer agreements are negotiated by the United Kingdom Government. Throughout the negotiations and at the time of the signing of the PTA with Libya, the Scottish Government's opposition was made clear. It was pointed out that the Scottish Prison Service had only one Libyan prisoner in custody. Notwithstanding that, the United Kingdom Government failed to secure, as requested by the Scottish Government, an exclusion from the PTA for anyone involved in the Lockerbie air disaster. As a consequence, Mr Al Megrahi was eligible for consideration for transfer in terms of the agreement entered into by the governments of the United Kingdom and Libya. I received numerous letters and representations and recognised that a decision on transfer would be of personal significance to those whose lives have been affected. Accordingly, I decided to meet with groups and individuals with a relevant interest. I met with the families of victims, those from the United Kingdom who had relatives on board the flight, as well as those whose kinfolk were murdered in their homes in Lockerbie. A lady from Spain whose sister was a member of the cabin crew, and I held a video conference with families from the United States. I am grateful to each and every one of them, as I said earlier, for their fortitude on a matter which I know is still a source of great pain. I also spoke to the United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the United States Attorney General Eric Holder. I met Minister Al-Obeidi and his delegation from the Libyan government. I noted and considered all the points presented and also relevant written representations I received. Prior to ratification of the prisoner transfer agreement, it was scrutinised by the Westminster Joint Committee on Human Rights. This was the first PTA that did not require the consent of the prisoner. As a result, Jack Straw, UK Secretary of State for Justice, gave a commitment that in cases where applications were not submitted personally by the prisoner must be given the opportunity to make representations. Mr Al Megrahi had the opportunity to make representations. He chose to do so in person. That was his decision. It would have been out with the tenets of natural justice to refuse this request. Therefore, I was duty-bound to meet him. It was clear that both the United States government and the American families objected to a prisoner transfer. They did so on the basis of agreements they said had been made prior to trial regarding the place of imprisonment of anyone convicted. The United States Attorney General Eric Holder was Deputy Attorney General at the time of the pre-trial negotiations. He was adamant that assurances had been given to the United States government that any person convicted would serve his sentence in Scotland. Many of the American families spoke of the comfort that they had placed upon these assurances over the past 10 years. That clear understanding was reiterated to me by the US Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. I sought the views of the